Hey everyone, it's Tables here again, and welcome back to part 5 of my Bravely Second Jobs tier list. It's been a little while since I've last recorded a part due to various issues in real life, but hopefully I can get these last few ones done soon. So upper mid now, going to have 4 jobs today, and we're really getting towards the jobs that are very good throughout the entire game. Some of the jobs you probably want to use on just about every playthrough, at least in some fashion. So without any further ado, let's get started on the first one. Okay, so rank 12 we have Astrologian. Astrologian is a support job which can be spellcrafted, which lets you do some quite interesting things in terms of how much support you give the party. Stats wise, Astrologian is actually reasonably solid. It's a lot better offensively than you might first think, due to having S rank rods and the best magic scaling. Its intelligence is not the best, but it's good enough that it can hit pretty hard. It's also got decent vitality for a mage, so it's marginally more durable than most other mages, but don't think it's going to be tanky or anything like that. It does have low agility, which seems like it might be a big issue, and I often criticize a lot of jobs having low agility. But on a mage it doesn't actually matter as much, because agility doesn't directly affect your damage output, it just affects your turn order. So yeah, the low agility hurts, but it's not terrible like it is for a lot of jobs. As a job command, it gives you quite a lot of good options. Early in the game, you've got your physical and mystic boons. 30% extra attack to a person is very significant, and it's pretty cheap to use as well. But adding spellcrafting, it gets even better. Early on, you're most likely going to use Mist with it. Setting up something like Physical Boon Mist will boost everyone's physical attack to 50%, sorry, 150%, and it will stay there for an extra turn or two thanks to the Mist reapplying it for 3 turns. The downside of that one is that it does take an extra turn to set up, because the Mist only applies at the end of the turn, which is a bit of a shame because it basically means you're anti-synergizing with Prescience, but oh well. As you get later in the game, you get better options for your spellcraft, or just other options in general. Arrow is a really common one for using astral magic, because the duration bonus you get from astral magic is based on the multiplier of the spellcraft. Arrow has a 2 times multiplier at maximum, and the game uses that, which basically means the duration of all astral magic is doubled when you use Arrow. So you can make something like Physical Boon affect everyone and last twice as long by using Arrow, which is very nice. Means you can sort of apply your buffs once and then just have them there permanently. It's even better when you also throw in Good Measure, because Good Measure for some reason gives you 2.75 times as big of a bonus. I don't know why it's more than the normal 2.5 times, but it is. So basically, if you have Limit Breaker, which incidentally of course is an Astrologian ability, you can get up to 82% bonuses from boons and wards just with one cast, which is pretty solid. Another option for later in the game is using Group Cast All, and that means you can just boon and get 30% attack for everyone, or ward 30% defense. Early in the game, Astrologian can struggle a little bit because it takes quite a lot of actions to get those boosts. 2 actions to get 30% attack to everyone is still nice, because you don't have many other ways of buffing your stats at that point, but it's still 2 actions to 30%, which is not amazing. With Mist, of course, that goes up to 50%, but Mist is quite MP intensive, and you can only have 1 Mist at once. With Blast, it would just be 30% flat out, but at least it goes early in the turn. Astrologian does have some strength early though. One notable one is the Speed Boon. It's, I think, the only job you get early on that can really boost everyone's speed. Fencer can boost its own speed, and I think Astrologian is the only one that boosts other people's, so that's quite useful for that. There's also the Elemental abilities, Elemental Ward in particular, you get very quickly. And of course later on you get Elemental Mirror, which is also really good against a lot of things. For example, Amy, who likes to use her fire abilities, you just reflect it back on her. And then, of course, very late in the game, you've got Elemental Barrier and Status Barrier, which are huge bonuses to have. In terms of support abilities, Precognition is a really nice one for going through dungeons. A lot of people feel that the dungeons in this game are some of the most dangerous parts. And it's even worse when you get enemies who brave attack you or first strike you. So reducing that chance completely to 0, well worth the 1 slot, I think. And you get this really early on as well. It's only level 3, so you can get it pretty quickly in chapter 1 and have it for basically the entire game. Prescience is nice, but I don't think it's worth 2 slots. It's a nice ability, and guaranteeing your support goes first can be really useful. If it affected heals, I'd maybe consider it at 2 slots, but it doesn't, and so I think it's a hard sell at 2 slots. And then the late game support abilities, Prolonged Support and Limit Breaker, are both fantastic. Prolonged Support, doubling the time support abilities last, which doesn't just affect Astrologian, of course. There's a lot of other jobs that have good support moves, and of course it affects the entire team once one person has it. So you could get one person who gets Prolonged Support from Astrologian, and then another person ends up being your buffer, and that works completely as well. Limit Breaker, similar, doubles your maximum stat buffs, roughly anyway. So things like 200% for attack and defensive stats, and that can be a really big deal as well. Especially, as I said, when you combine with Good Measure, Astrologian buffing, you can easily get to 200%. I'd say these abilities are slightly less good than they probably first look, just because a lot of late game enemies dispel you a lot. They are still really useful though, not everything dispels you, and just having 1 or 2 turns with 200% attack can be a big deal. So overall, Astrologian is a very nice support job. It does struggle a little bit early on, but it's got a lot of good things to make up for that. Thanks to its good stats, it's good to combine with a offensive job as well. I'll probably stick Spellcraft on it, or possibly Groupcast all later in the game, and also probably an offensive or defensive magic job. It's got A rank staves, so it can do white magic as well. That's an option. Really, it can combine with any job command. Any job that's using magic can use Astrologian pretty well to give your team buffs. So yeah, it's a really nice job. Provides a lot of offensive and defensive support, and one that's well worth having on your team. And rank 11 is Performer. So straight from one support job to another. Performer is the non-magic group stat buffing job. Stat-wise, Performer is really not that good. It's got good agility, which is nice because it means you can often go first. And like a lot of support jobs, it's got 3 S rank weapons. Really, that's it in terms of stats. It's always going to be bad at doing damage. It can kind of do magic damage okay, thanks to S rods, not completely garbage magic scaling, and above average intelligence. But it's never going to be great at it. Power up does at least get your stats up, which is nice. Job command, of course, is where you really want Performer. It has a bunch of different plus 20% to the whole team's stats for 4 turns. You've got attack, physical defense, magic attack in there. Sadly, no speed is a big one that's missing. Love Rush from default is no longer a move Performer gets, so that's a bit of a shame. But it does have a few nice moves at the end to make up for it. You get My Hero at level 9, which is surprisingly early actually. It was the final ability in default, so it took a long time to get. But here, getting to job level 9, you can realistically do early in chapter 5. And then after that you get Hearts on Fire, which is 25% to both attack and physical and magic attack. And then later the Grand Ship, which is the same for defences. And those can be really significant abilities to unlock if you want to use Encore. With Encore, 25% chance of triggering another ability, and that can include My Hero, and it can trigger off of My Hero as well. And this makes a typical old Performer setup, which was the My Hero battery, where you had a performer with Freelancer or vice versa, who would then use My Hero and Mimic 3 times. That still works very well in this game. It does need extra BP from something else to keep it running permanently due to the lack of low leverage, but it can still work, and with Encore you average 1 extra buff per turn. So sometimes that provides you extra BP from My Hero, sometimes it provides attack or defensive buffs from Hearts of Fire and the Grand Chip. Sometimes you only just get one of the weaker ones, but you know, it's free buffs anyway for just 1 slot, which is really nice. Even if you don't want to do a My Hero based battery, this is still a really nice support job. Because everything is group effects automatically, it doesn't take any extra support like Spellcraft does for Astrologian. So you can quickly get whatever buff you want onto the whole team, then use your extra slots for whatever you feel is most useful. You can make a tanky performer by using Shield Roar and Dual Shields, or just throw all your support abilities on your performer. Encore, Limit Breaker, etc. One of the downsides of Performer is how expensive it is MP wise. Most of these abilities cost between about 24 and 45 MP, and that quickly ends up running your MP out, especially as Performer itself doesn't have an MP bonus. So you do need to watch your MP with Performer, probably have some sort of source of MP for it. It could just be steady MP recover, which you get very soon after you unlock Performer for the first time. So that's quite nice to consider. Probably the other downside I'd say of Performer is it doesn't really provide any good support abilities. So unless you want to use it for a job command, you're not getting a huge amount from leveling it up. You do get Power Up, and one of the nice subtle things about Power Up is because it's a 5% buff every turn, it basically makes any short buffs last forever. Say for example you use Ironclad and you have Power Up set. Ironclad will raise your physical defense to maximum for 1 turn, but then Power Up will trigger at the end of the turn, and so your physical defense will stay at maximum permanently. But it is 2 slots, which can be a bit of an issue, because 2 slots to keep your buffs permanent can be a bit of a hard sell. Overall though, Performer does still provide that BP battery setup and provides quick and easy buffing, which can be a really huge deal. It's easy to use pretty much in any setup, and especially once you throw in Encore and get some of those higher level abilities, it can provide huge amounts of buffing very quickly, and that is the reason Perform's ended up very high in this list, almost in the top 10. Okay, here we are in the top 10 at last, and the job in 10th is Swordmaster. So Swordmaster is a really interesting job, I think. Its job commands are almost entirely focused on counter-attacking, but it does that very well. And on top of that, it has some excellent support abilities. On top of having S-rank katanas, which are the best weapon type, and pretty good stats overall. But as a result of that, it can be a really nice job for a lot of the game. So stat-wise, Swordmaster is pretty good overall. The only thing it's really missing is an agility boost, but it's got above average strength, good HP, it's got A rank armors, it's got that S rank katanas, which is really good. Slightly lower than average MP, but its moves don't really use MP, so that's not a huge deal, depending on what job command you use. But basically, it's got good stats as a main job. The only thing I don't like about Swordmaster as a main job is its specialty counter is not very useful. Especially, in fact, it anti-synergizes with the Swordmaster job command. Because if you're ever using a Swordmaster job command counter, specialty counter cannot activate, which is kind of a shame. Nothing Ventured and Before Swine are very, very powerful abilities. They do a lot of things at once for you. Half damage you take, and draw aggro, and then counter attack. And this is a really good combination of 3 things. Obviously drawing aggro and halving damage you take is really nice, because that's really fantastic tanking just in one ability. But then the damage they output is also really good. 2 times for Nothing Ventured, and I think it's 4 times for Before Swine. So that's dealing a lot of damage out after drawing that aggro in. The other abilities it's got there as well, I said Eye for an Eye. Eye for an Eye is a bit different to that. That just makes you counterattack for 4 times damage when anyone is hit on your team. Against groups of enemies, if you can't kill them quickly, Eye for an Eye is just a really good way of destroying them. Other abilities it has that are quite notable. Squeaky Wheel. Against bosses, it's a 30% chance to drop their BP by 1. If you combine this with Mimic, you can start doing some silly things, keeping bosses locked at negative BP. It's how I actually beat the final boss in default the first time I ever fought it. Free Lunch is a very popular, but I think slightly overrated ability. It drops MP costs to 0. Sort of the common thing there is combine it with Pirate and go Free Lunch, Amp Strike repeatedly. It sounds really good on paper, but you can often actually do better damage than that in other ways. And having to use Free Lunch every second turn does limit your damage output considerably. Even if you have a good BP source, you're only getting 7 attacks instead of 8 doing that, which isn't a huge deal, but it's worse than attacking 8 times. The place I think Swordmaster really shines is its support abilities. In particular, 2 of the early ones it gets. Katana Lore is by far, I would say, the best lore skill. And the reason for that is that katanas are just really good when they're dual or triple wielded. Katanas give a plus 15% crit bonus. So if you have 3 katanas equipped, it's a 45% critical bonus. And that's a pretty big deal, because that means you can get 54% critical when you add in the 9% base critical rate by equipping 3 katanas. Or another common thing is 2 katanas and a spear, to give you 39% critical rate plus 25% extra damage when using group attacks. So Katana Lore can be really good on pretty much any physical job when you want to dual or triple wield. And you want to dual or triple wield a lot of physical jobs. When you are doing, say, dual, triple, or even quad wield, I didn't even say that, quad wield as well later in the game, equally good there, 69% critical rate. Multitask is another really good ability when you are triple, dual, quad wielding, because you can use those standard attacks and get a big bonus out of them. You can easily be hitting for above 10,000 later in the game with standard attacks, and then multitask means you've got a 33% chance of doing that again. So it's like a 33% damage bonus for 1 slot. That's really effective, really nice to have. Any sort of standard attacking base build really likes multitask. After that, the rest of its abilities aren't that good for a while. Counter, I don't think is worth the 2 slots. Counter Amp is really nice if you're using Swordmaster. Possibly if you're using Tsusemi and Transience. But it's a bit of a harder sell there. But then Redoubled Effort is really nice as well. With Swordmaster, for example, you can default a lot, and then use your counters once you're at 3 BP, and then Redoubled Effort is like another 30% bonus damage for each counter you do. And of course you've got stored BP, which you can use whenever you need to. So that can be really nice as well for certain types of setup. The main reason Swordmaster has gotten this high is because it provides a ton of good support and it's available early. It's a very nice job command for a lot of the game, providing really good tanking right from the start. It provides good offensive options thanks to Katana Lore and Multitask. It's a pretty good job, main job as well. And later in the game it doesn't really drop off, as Eye for an Eye is really nice as well, and Free Lunch does enable some strategies. Its main weaknesses are probably its lack of sort of direct offense, so you're going to need a job command to provide some good offensive options for you. Hawkeye is a nice one for that because it's versatile and provides lots of different types of attacks. Pirate, as I mentioned, is a common choice. I actually quite like Pirate, not because of Amp Strike, but because it lets you debuff enemies and then also counter, so you can sort of control the enemies really well with a Swordmaster Pirate combo. And Swordmaster itself can be a nice sort of job command on a lot of either tanky jobs or even on not so tanky jobs, because you halve the damage you take anyway, which is really nice. But yeah, unlike other tanky jobs like Knight, Guardian, etc., You can use Swordmaster commands to draw the aggro and do a bit of extra damage out. So overall, Swordmaster provides a lot of really nice things, and that's why it just about squeaks in at 10th place on this list. Okay, rank number 9 is Red Mage, and I think this is probably one of the last really shocking ones in its position. When I first made my list, I think I had Red Mage probably around 15th to 20th, and then I started just thinking about, what does it actually provide? And what strategies does it enable? And it just kept creeping up my list again and again and again as I realised just how much this job actually does provide for you. It's kind of weird because it never feels like it's a great job, but it provides so much in terms of support abilities and so much versatility that I really think it deserves this position. So let's talk a little bit about its stats to start with. That's usually where we start. Stat-wise, Red Mage is quite good. The main thing it is versatile. It's got A rank rods and A rank staves, and it's got both the intelligence and mind and magic scaling to make use of both. And of course, the job command provides both of those things. The weird one is it can actually do physical damage quite well as well. It doesn't have amazing weapon levels for this, only A rank swords, but B rank katanas and spears does give it options there. Katanas and spears are both very good physical weapons, and since its job command already provides a lot of magic options, you can give it a physical job command and have that sort of a backup plan. It's also got decent agility and hit scaling to make use of that physical damage. Another thing it has, which is unusual for a mage, is C rank armors, which you're not going to care much about the helms and actual armor, but C rank shields can be useful on a mage. So, job command wise, Red Mage is actually really good early in the game, which isn't really surprising, I guess, given that it provides a ton of abilities very quickly. So right after you get Red Mage, you can buy level 1 and 2 Black Magic and White Magic. That means this job provides you 8 abilities immediately. Now 4 of those are just different elemental attacks, okay, but you also get Asper to drain magic, Cure to heal, Asuna for status conditions, I forget what the others, I think Raise, and that might be it actually, yeah. That's a lot of versatility straight away that you get, like, immediately. A little bit later you then get Blizzara, Fira, Cura, and Erora, which provides even more attacking options and a bit more healing. And then later, of course, you then get Curada and other various things. But the really notable ones there are the Ra level spells with Hammer are the best magic damage you can do against a single target for quite a while, I think. Because the Ra level spells have better scaling, 3.5 times scaling compared to summons, which are 2.5 times, and Hammer doesn't give that double bonus for spellcraft like most others do. The Ra level spells as a hammer are generally better than summons are, or at least sort of on par for a lot less MP. But as a result of that, they're really good for sort of hammering enemies, no pun intended. There's also, of course, Asper to keep your MP up, and you've got that versatility with the healing spells as well early on. You can heal for pretty good amounts of HP, even without a staff actually, with white magic. And once you get to sort of chapter 2, you get access to Curada, and you can heal an awful lot with that straight away. So yeah, Red Mage is very versatile early in the game. The big downside is having to actually buy all those spells, because that's a lot of money to sink, which I think is a bit of a pain. And it's that combined with the fact that Thief is just even better early on, that I recommend getting Thief before Red Mage. Which, as I said, I think I mentioned this in the Thief bio. That might seem weird that I'm putting Red Mage so much higher, but the real difference is how much better Red Mage is in terms of its support late game. Now the Red Mage job command doesn't actually get any better once you've gotten to job level 6 because you've got all the spells at that point. But then Red Mage starts providing some incredibly useful support abilities. All but about 2 of these are really useful, so let's actually go through from the top. Job level 3, you get turntables. This is kind of useless actually at first. You might think, oh, you'll dodge occasionally and it'll be useful, but because of how avoid works in this game, it's very rarely going to activate unless you force things to miss. Most commonly with Utsusemi from Ninja, although you can also use blind in theory. BP recovery is one I see a lot of people sort of say why Red Mage is really good, and it is, but not super early in the game. It's sort of just a filler ability at that point because you're not going to get hit with a huge amount of status conditions. But later on in the game, BP recovery is key to probably the best BP battery setup in the game, where you set BP recovery on everyone and then use a patissiere with items for all, throwing elemental status cakes at everyone on your team. That triggers BP recovery, so everyone gains 1 BP. And provided you choose an elemental cake that the enemy isn't going to attack you with, there's no downside. You're just gaining 1 PP 4 times per turn. At the cost of 1 slot for everyone and a little bit of money. That's pretty fantastic late in the game. Revenge and Revival are both kind of they're not really that useful. But then we get to the level 9 and onwards abilities, and this is where Red Mage becomes a top tier job. Well, not top tier, but a high tier, or upper mid, whatever you want to call it. Because these are the abilities that sort of make the Ghost Mage setup, which is another one of the really good late game setups, actually work. The main one there is MP3 and Pinch, MP3 and A Pinch. Without this, most Ghost Mage setups won't work. It's probably the single most important ability to a Ghost Mage setup. And so, in fact, I'd say, a lot of the stuff used for Ghost Mage setups that you think of as being like, oh, this is what makes it really good, they just make it a little bit better. That's things like your Time Mage, your Yokai, even your Spellcraft, arguably. They make your Ghost Mage better, but the thing that really makes it work is MP3 and a Pinch. Because without that, your MP runs out and your setup fails. So that is a huge, huge deal for your Ghost Mage setups. And even more than that, what's another very common ability used in Ghost Mage setups? Chain Spell. And of course that's another one from Red Mage. It only comes late in the game, so it is only really good for sort of Ghost Mage setups and a few post-game things. But Chain Spell, 3 slots, and it basically doubles the effectiveness of your magic. And that's a really huge deal for Ghost Mage setups who want to just deal out as much damage as quickly as possible. That one isn't necessary to make them work, but it's a very, very big thing for them. The final ones there, in the red, is not quite as useful as the others. It's nice with a few sort of different setups, and it's actually not bad in the Ghost Mage setup either, because you often want to just brave down to -4 BP, and it boosts your damage there, but it's not the best ability most of the time. There are a few setups where you can make it work, especially with BP batteries. If your Red Mage goes first, or your Mage in the red, goes first, they can attack 4 times, get that damage boost, and then get the BP back afterwards. Those support abilities are just so good, and that's the main reason Red Mage has ended up in such a high rank. As a job, it is very versatile. It's quite useful early in the game thanks to its versatility. Late in the game, it's not as good as a main job and not as good as a job command, although it does still provide you offensive and defensive options simultaneously. So it does still have some use, but its support ability that it provides is just so huge to different setups. And even if you don't want to use any sort of combos based on it, it provides a lot of good abilities in general. So it's often a very useful job to level up just for that. And it's because of those reasons that Red Mage has ended up at 9th place. Okay, well that is the upper mid tiers completed. We're now into the top 10. We've only got 2 more tiers to go. 5 jobs in high tier and then 3 jobs in top tier. Yeah, I'm hoping that I'll be able to get the next part out relatively soon. But until then, I hope you've enjoyed this part. So thanks for watching.